The heir of a murdered Greek ruler returns 20 years later to reclaim his throne by way of a quest for the Golden Fleece. In the 1963 sword and sandals adventure, Jason and the Argonauts. And that's the movie we're dusting off this week on Movie Bones.
Zeus, my godly husband, did you for some reason order the profanation of my temple in Thessaly?
That was entirely the fault of Pelaius. Not content with winning the throne of Thessaly as I wished, he tried to avoid losing it as I've commanded. I know that you've been insulted, my dear.
I want to help Jason.
As you wish. How many times did Aristo's daughter Briseis call upon you? By name?
5.
Well, then you can help her brother 5 times. 5 times only you can help him to overthrow Pelaius. And that is my final word.
I will say that the gods are kind of hard to figure out, aren't they? You know what I mean?
How familiar are you with the Iliad?
Or
just Greek mythology in general?
Well, I've read this is going back a long ways now, but I have read the Odyssey a long time ago. I am familiar with certain reasons why the Greeks, it's like, I understand the inclination of the ancient Greeks and the Romans to kind of impart very, very human motivations and human attributes to their gods. And it makes sense that's the nature of what they were doing there. So, I guess my only disappointment, it's like the reason why I guess a movie like this kind of gets me a little frustrated is the fact that for all the kind of conniving and backstabbing you hear about, I mean, look at Hercules. You know, I haven't even seen the Disney version, but I know it involves, the classic stuff is like Zeus and Hades are at each other's throats. It's like there's this conflict between the two of them, and there's this drama behind the scenes that, in the Judeo-Christian world, it's like, no, God is peace and love, and it's like, and heaven is pretty much, it's all as it should be, right? It's a very different understanding of theology, but this very mortal kind of reflection of the gods is what you get. And it's like, but I'm missing that in this movie. It's like, there's so little of it. You know what I'm saying?
So this particular myth takes place way before the Iliad.
Just to set the, setting the frame in the right location time-wise.
There was one point during this movie where they're fighting for lack of better terms, a giant mechanical man. And the way they beat him is Jason figures out that there's a weakness in the heel area. Of course, again, this is like a robot. You really have to think robot when you're watching this film.
And I was thinking that too.
It is. They basically unplug him, and or the juices fall out and everything.
Hot lava like stuff comes out. Yeah. Really hot lava. And it's like, get away from that thing. He was just hanging around there. It's like, dude, that's gonna burn you up. But yeah.
I won't lie to you. Like, that was a make or break moment for me watching this film. If they say that thing is Achilles one time, I am turning this off and never looking back.
I'm glad
because
they didn't.
Because I know where it takes place within the mythos of these stories. So you're right. The gods are hard to figure out, and they're hard to figure out throughout most myths because of that overwhelming humanity that is placed upon them. And everything.
I mean, it makes them relatable in one sense, as long as you provide, I think, as I've seen other Sword and Sandals where at least it made at least a little bit more sense in the sense that it's like they showed more of like the conniving backstab. Because if you're going to make them basically just all powerful, human beings that are just amped up, and all that drama makes sense as long as you show enough of it to know what's going on,
Yeah.
Just to give you an example, it's like, later in the film, they actually make it to Colchis, I think is the name of the place they're going to. It's actually a real location, and it would be considered modern day Georgia in the southern, in the Caucasus, in kind of like that border area between Europe and Asia. They have a god called Hecate that they worship, and Hecate has supposedly given them given them the golden fleece for their own protection, by the way. But Zeus and some of the other gods are like, no, Jason, you have to go and take this thing. Or at least he gets it in his craw that this is what the gods want him to do. And you're not contesting that. So you get the idea that there's this combative rivalry back and forth, but you never see that. And it's like, that would have helped a lot. It would give more context to the randomness that you kind of see of the adventures. You know what I'm
Well, see,
saying?
that's the wild thing about that is that there are times in the myths where things like that do happen. Like, honestly, one of the most, I wouldn't say frustrating is the best word, maybe sometimes head bashing part of watching a film like this, they do a really good job of like sticking as at most to like the feel of some of the myths as you might actually get as they were being told and everything. It's just like, they could be that fickle. They could just like move one way on a whim. Now, I'm not saying that they don't have explanations in certain things. Again, I'm just going to use Iliad's it's the freshest on my mind, so I'm going to use that. But like in the Iliad, there were times because what's happening within Troy and in Greece, you do have times, well, you have the gods kind of fighting against each other in a way, and you have Zeus being the chief god, obviously. Zeus plays both sides. There are times where Zeus is like, all right, I'm going to give a victory here to, the Greeks. And then over here, he's like, well, I'm going to give a victory here to the Trojans. And there are reasons for it. But you do come away frustrated. And he's not presented as a bad guy at all in that story. He's not doing it, just because there are reasons for him doing it. But what you don't really get is like, you don't really understand, like, why not just pick a side? Like, you don't, even like when you understand that he's like, the reason why he's doing it, you're almost like, why not pick a side? And then you find out that he kind of has already picked a side. He's willing to give Troy, some victories, but like, you also learn, like, at the end of the day, he's like, no, I'm going to let Greece win. I'm going to let the Greek states win. But, it still plays, it's this back and forth kind of thing. It's oftentimes Greek gods, when they say something, it's like, okay, they're not going to waver from what they say. If they say, this person over here is going to die, or I'm going to make sure they die, they won't back off from that whatsoever. And it's just kind of like, dang. So it's like, in this, it's like, oh, you've got to take out that guy. They were never, like, even before, that's the thing. It was always going to happen. That's how it would happen in the myth. It's always going to happen, even if he just gave it away. No. We've already decreed that he's got to die. We've already decreed that he's got to be defeated, so he's going to have to be defeated. That is the frustrating thing about just that in general.
There's one of the frustrating things I had with the movie, especially is like, you have Hera who gives has these 5 chances, as Zeus had said, these 5 ways to help Jason. And he blows them all in the first 5 minutes. He couldn't use them up fast enough. I have to ask, is it that way in the stories? Do you remember it too, or?
I think it was that way.
Man,
I thought about reading the myth myself before, like, after watching the film, just to see what was matched up and what didn't match up. But ultimately, oftentimes, that is kind of what happens. Is they'll do exactly that. They'll blow through all of their stuff. And it's just kind of like, just really, really frustrating.
It is in a way, because it's like I know that they probably had their own reasons of storytelling for doing that, because these stories had other meanings besides just telling a good ripping tale. It wasn't just about that. I'm sure there's more cultural and spiritual aspects to it in terms of like trying to teach moral lessons. But the idea is that when you're trying to convert this into a movie, now you suddenly are faced with the idea of having to make this into an actual entertaining film. And this is where I think that personally is like, this is where creative license can take over. You know what I'm saying? You can actually improve for the screen, for the purposes of sharing a screen going, experience. You can try to find, some good lessons, some good things to take out of it in a format that they can digest in a way that makes sense. And that's really what I've seen better than this. As a whole, the genre isn't known for any really outstanding films, but it can be better than this. You know what I'm saying? And I think it could be.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. Again, that kind of comes back to what I was saying earlier, which is the whole, they do a really good job in the landscape of, Greek mythology type movies and everything. They do a really good job of like sticking to it and everything. And I know that there's a lot of, Hercules movies out there, a lot of different Greek movies out there, Greek mythology movies, that is, or kind of set within the Greek mythos, because, like, Hercules versus the barbarian women.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
not Greek mythology.
Hercules versus the Moon Men. That's my favorite.
Yeah. But I mean, but like, I know that kind of stuff is out there and everything. And because I know that, I'm saying like these type of movies, they do a good job of sticking to the source material as much as they can. And you're right, it does cause a problem. It does cause a big problem. Like one of the things that we talked about last night when we were talking about the movie, like post both of us watching it before we got to this point, is you said it outright. You just felt like there was stuff missing from the movie.
Yeah. It's like,
and
wait,
my
they
response
started.
was,
Yeah.
My response was, there is stuff actually missing from the movie. It's the rest of the myth, because the myth does not end. The myth doesn't end in a way that would be good for the movie. Because do you want to know how the myth ends? I'll tell you how the myth ends. Pelias wins.
So he actually, despite Zeus's insistence that Pelias must die,
he will eventually die. I mean, that's all. Like I said, when Zeus says it, he will eventually die. But at first, Jason and Medeus, they are driven out by Pelias, and then after all that happens, he breaks up with her and goes and marries someone else.
Nice. Well, I will say it's like, in terms of at least the way the movie portrayed it, they didn't exactly have a huge chemistry or anything. She basically wakes up in his arms after almost drowning. And this kind of gets into another aspect of the film that I actually did like, which is the kind of overacting a bit, especially toward the end between her and the king of whatever that place where they were going to was. But it's like she practically has a quivering lip. Oh my goodness, he's so gorgeous. Yeah, it's like, okay. It's like, but that it's there. Because I never felt much for it. When you're describing it to me now, they broke up. It's like, oh yeah, I really feel that. It's like.
Speaking of, I know this is the Jason movie, or it's the Jason story and everything, but you want to know my favorite, honestly, the character that, that I got the most from as the movie was progressing, and even though we didn't get a bunch of stuff with him, I just thought he was the most interesting character. Believe it or not, it was Hercules.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I was just kind of, drawn to the character. Probably some of it is because Hercules, beyond the Disney movie, has always been one of my more, I always liked the guy. I know enough of his 12 tasks.
He's kind of got a mixed history, though, if you think about it. I haven't read them in depth, but I have learned about the 12 labors, and he does some finger in your eye. He kills a guy and steals his cattle.
And I think he's actually there on the whole entire quest with Jason to get the Golden Fleece.
You see, that would have been interesting, at least.
Here's the thing, too. When Hercules does what he does, and then, they're like, oh, you've got to leave Hercules behind and everything. And then Hera's, the way that Hera says it, it's very soft-spoken, oh, he's got other things to do. And it's like Hera, in the stories, Hera hates him. She hates him. because he's a child of Zeus and somebody else.
He's Jon Snow, too.
Yeah. So she's not a fan of Hercules. And she's trying to be a thorn in his side every chance she gets. So, if you know that, you're going, that's kind of funny that Hera does it that way. But I mean, I didn't really care for the delivery that they put on the actress who played Hera and everything, because I'm like, nah, she's cheering that kind of stuff on. She's like, leave him.
And it's like you said, it's so strange that they would choose that to be something, because like you said, if he's in the actual stories, he's there throughout the entire journey. It's like, it seems like that would be more interesting to keep going that way anyway. I mean, I was disappointed in that too, because he was around for all of 5 minutes and he's Hercules, you think he'd find some better use for him. It's like, you hired this guy because he's the biggest and strongest. The way he's portrayed in the film is more of a liability. And then they just get rid of him anyway, so he's got no chance to redeem himself. So it seems like there would be at least more interest there if you could at least just keep him on. It felt like an abrupt move that it's like, I don't know why you did that. It didn't really serve anything narratively. It was a moment of drama, I suppose, because it's, wow, you brought in this big name guy and we expected a lot from him, but he's going off in a sad state right now. And it's like, yeah, but what does that do for the story? You know what I mean?
That's why I wish he was there and everything. Like, if you're going to make this guy a liability, keep him around so that we can see him screw up more. I hate to talk about length because, at times, but this movie could probably serve for maybe having an extra hour thrown onto it just so we can get to know these characters better. Or some of the guys look very alike, and you're like, is that? And you're like, if you're not paying enough attention, you might forget who which character is, except someone like Hercules, because he's
distinctive, at least.
He's very distinctive.
And then the movie just ends, And I had the same problem you did about distinguishing characters. I mixed up the son of Pelias, who I can't even think of the name of right now, the guy who ends up betraying them. For a bit, I mixed him up with the guy who ends up, the smart, wise guy who kind of not beats Hercules at discus, but he kind of ties him, but using his brains. And even that guy, who I can't think of his name, but he sticks out for me. The only reason he sticks out is because the way he died was the dumbest way possible. You know what I'm saying? He gets crushed by Telos statue, and nobody sees it, which is weird. You think this would be, someone would see it, of all the crew, someone would see that happening. The reason he gets crushed is because he goes back for the toothpick thing, the golden toothpick thing that Hercules stole. It's like, why are you risking your life for this toothpick that Hercules stole? Is get out of there, and you're supposed to be the smart one. I just wanted to smack him, you know what I mean?
That's probably the most annoying thing. It's you felt like you had time to get out of there.
Yeah. And I don't know if he's a named character in the stories or not, but it seems like, again, I think that all this points to is that I don't even know if you need necessarily more time to develop this into a better story. I think you just need to better use the time that they were given. It's about the decisions you make as a storyteller. And that's what kind of really ends up frustrating, I think, in the end.
Tell me, Jason, why did you come to Colchis? In peace. I said why, not how. Altogether, how many men have you?
Enough.
And you say you do not threaten us. Envoys who come to me in deceit remain in death. I know you've come for the fleece. And I know, too, that if you cannot win it by bargaining, then you plan to steal it. But we'll never part with it, Jason. It is a gift of the gods. It has brought wealth and peace to Colchis. And should we ever let it go, it would mean plague and famine and the destruction of our country. We can no longer welcome or entertain you, but treat you as you deserve. As thieves, as pirates, as murderers.
It's almost as if he was carrying on both halves of the conversation there. It's because he's almost perturbing himself into that state. And I just got a kick out of that. But there are those moments where you get that kind of over-the-topness. And it was with his daughter or whatever the other character was, the woman that he all falls in love with. I can't think of the name. Those couple of things. I mean, there's some great work by Ray Harryhausen. I mean, that's kind of what the film's mostly remembered for, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, the special effects, especially the skeletons. And I would add up there the Telos statue coming to life. And maybe even the harpies, if you want to include a third scene. There's some other scenes that have his work in it, but those are the most successful at kind of integrating, the live action with the claymation stuff.
The my only gripe against the claymation stuff is...
What's that?
And it's not even the claymation. It's just if you got a scene, you could probably do a better job of filming them fighting with their weapons. I'm not talking about the skeletons. I'm talking about the warriors. That did kind of throw me off a little bit because they're just out there swinging. They're wildly swinging. And it's just kind of it's you can tell. Even though we know that they don't have people in front of them, what I was sitting there thinking is you can really tell that they're just swinging at air.
Oh, yeah. At least tell the actors to kind of make, come up short at times so that it looks like you're hitting something solid instead of
yeah.
There's no, interruption of momentum in their swings at all. Even when they're quote unquote hitting the shields of the skeleton warriors or something like that. And that's one of the better examples of the kind of integration at the time. It's still remembered for that. And it's kind of a sad state of affairs that that's what it was. But it's but the claymation itself is the way the skeletons fight. I will give full props again to Ray Harryhausen. And we've said it before.
Yeah.
He's in everything we've seen. And we've seen, was it 20 Million Miles to Earth? I think we saw his work in that one too. It didn't save either movie, that one or this one. But at least, it's you can still appreciate the kind of effort that went into the model making and the model animation that he did. It's easy to forget because nobody uses these names in America, obviously, very much. Unless you've been to Greece or these areas, it's hard to be able to pinpoint. It's important to remember these are real places. In Greece, there's an actual, was it Thessalonia? Thessalonia, yeah. Colchis region, I guess, is actually, as I said, it's in Georgia, on the eastern coast of the Black Sea. And to get from one point to the other, it's like you can actually see there's only one way to get there. You'd have to pass through the Strait of Dardanelles and the Bosphorus, which is in Istanbul. And both those places are very narrow places. Like you can almost see that it being the inspiration for where they had the rocks fall down, where it gets narrow and you have to pass through that. At least you can see some historical, inspiration for. I found that interesting, at least.
This is definitely a story that, like, if they remade it ever, I'd probably watch. I'm sure they actually have remade it, but I'm saying, like, if we ever got a modern retelling of this particular story or the particular myth itself, and who knows, we might start getting them. They might start cranking them out again.
Is it just me, or is it something I'm not aware of, that the Greeks must have had like this standing protocol to carry enough netting with them on every voyage to cover an entire temple?
Probably.
I was like, that's an awful lot of netting for one group to be carrying, even if you're just going fishing,
Super convenient to have all of that.
Yeah. Verdict time. I'm going to say that, the film's notable, as we said, for Harryhausen's work. Mostly just kind of straddles the line between camp and take me serious type stuff that kind of makes me feel a little bit like, eating lukewarm soup. It's not bad enough to be don't look at it. It's got too much that I would say is still admirable about it to be it from that category. But I'm not going to be coming back to this, man. This is bad dates for me.
Yeah, I think I must say bad dates. I'd almost say belongs in a museum, but it does a good job. Like I said, it does a good job of telling you the myth itself. I don't think it does a good job of super portraying it in a more humanistic way. And that sometimes is a problem of the time period itself. And I'm talking about the time period in which the movie's filmed. We don't get the more human sides of some characters at times. Of course, there's a lot to be said about the characters themselves, just because, we don't really know much about them other than, hey, do this, and they go and do the thing. But it does a good job of, like, going through the myth itself. So, there's that. If you're a fan of Greek mythology, I think you'd probably just, one-off watching it would probably be a fun thing. But ultimately, like, I can't see myself sitting down again and going, you know what, I want to watch this movie.
This movie's a primer for better things. It's a primer. Yeah. Hopefully hopefully give some ideas and some creative inspiration to, like I said, to try and take what's there and kind of reinterpret it for modern audiences. At this time, we'd like to remind our listeners out there that if you're having a good time with Ryan and me dusting off these old movies in search of celluloid treasure, please do like, subscribe, comment, and of course, follow us on your podcast purveyor of choice. Tell us what you think we got wrong and clue us in on a few titles you'd like us to see cover on future episodes. And on the subject of future episodes, Ryan, what do we got lined up for next week? I think it's something you wanted to do.
Yeah, this is going to be an interesting film to watch. Next week's film is I'm probably just going ahead and say it. The best part of this film is definitely going to be, Sir Christopher Lee. Tubi says this: indelible performances, lush locations, and sinister sensuality mark what may be the most faithful film adaptation of Bram Stoker's vampire classic. Again, this movie stars Christopher Lee as Count Dracula himself. Yeah. Klaus Kinski and Herbert Lom. It's directed by Jess Franco. And yes, of course, as I said it, the movie is titled Count Dracula.
And I have seen this already. I'm listening to you say the words, and I already know the answers to all your questions. but I'm actually eager to hear your experience of the film.
I'll give you guys a little spoiler alert here. The book itself, not a fan of the book. Really, I'm not a big fan of the book. I thought the book was a little bit boring, and amongst other things. But I'll get into that as we probably.
I have to ask you this: have you seen the 1990s version with Keanu Reeves and?
I'm gonna watch that at some point because I've also heard that one's a good adaptation of it. Now it's not. I already know enough about it to know where they go off the deep end and everything from the book itself, but I do plan on watching it.
Well, that'll make an interesting conversation because I will be bringing up that movie as well in the context of next week's review.
If I can find it somewhere, I might watch it. But don't count on me watching that one between now and then.
No. But and like I said, that falls outside. That's the '90s, so it falls outside our purview anyway. So, but yeah, so looking forward to that, and especially for all the reasons we've talked about. So that's all there is to say for this week's folks. So until next week, folks out there, we'll see you next week. And Ryan, I'll see you next week.
See you next week.
All right, folks. Bye-bye.
Deliver to me the children of the Hydra's teeth, the children of the night!